Hello and welcome to our webinar on sustainable procurement, packaging, and shipping. My name is Deep Chahal and I'm a project manager with Synergy Foundation. I work with businesses across the province and to assess and improve their environmental performance, as well as create educational webinars on different topics of sustainability. Before we begin, I'd like to share a little bit about Synergy Foundation. Since 2013, our nonprofit has been driving innovation in green business, circular economy initiatives, and food security programs. Through key projects like BC Green Business and Project Zero, we supported hundreds of businesses in making sustainable shifts. And we're excited to have you here as a part of the Squamish webinar series, which is funded by Province of BC's Rural Economic Diversification and Infrastructure Program. And on the agenda today is a quick introduction to circular economy, understanding the fundamentals of sustainable procurement and how we can be voting for sustainability with our dollars, looking at some of the best practices and options when it comes to packaging, and finally understanding sustainable shipping practices. Let's start by looking at the problem that circular economy is trying to address, and that is in 2020, the mass of human-made materials officially outweighed all living biomass. This means that everything we produced, buildings, cars, plastic, now surpasses the combined weight of all plants, animals, and marine life on Earth. This statistic underscores why we need to rethink our consumption and waste habits. And the calculation includes everything from our built environment, like roads, building infrastructure, to products that we use in our everyday life, like coffee mugs, smartphones, jewelry. This calculation only includes objects that are in use and not waste. With waste included, human-made mass outweighed biomass in 2013. So that tells us that we know we're extracting far too many virgin resources, most of which are destined for pollution with our current linear economic model. And we need to decouple economic growth and natural resource consumption. So currently, most businesses operate in a linear economy. The traditional linear economy can be described as by the phrase take, make, waste. So where resources are extracted, used, and then discarded. This model leads to massive waste as well as environmental degradation. So what's different in the circular economy model is that raw materials and manufactured goods are designed to remain in the system. To do this, we use processes like reduced consumption, reuse and repair, redistribution, reconditioning, and recycling, all of which are powered by renewable energy. So these five re-entry mechanisms you can see in the diagram here, the inner loops are smaller, and these are areas of circularity that are prioritized first as they keep goods and materials in use at their highest value. So going through these re-entry mechanisms, first we have reduce, which suggests that through efficient consumption and production processes, waste can be reduced before it's even generated. Then we have reuse and repair, which means that through continued reuse, maintenance, and repair, a product's useful life can be extended. Then we've got redistribute, so using methods such as resale and donation of products can continue to provide value throughout its useful life instead of becoming waste. And then we've got recondition. Products can be restored to like new condition, biomanufactured, and then redistributed to consumers. And then finally, we've got recycle, where products at the end of their life are separated into their base materials, which re-enter the production process to create new products. And generally, recycling is seen as the last option, as it is the most energy intensive and requires major changes to the goods. When all other re-entry mechanisms have been exhausted, that's when recycling should be utilized. Is only 7.2% circular, which means that nearly 93% of all products and materials are destined for landfill, incineration, or left to break down in our waterways and on land at the end of life. This means that of all products, materials, and resources in existence, only a small percentage are re-entering the economy. So why should we make the shift to circular economy now? Well, the first reason is to meet climate targets. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, stated that to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, we need to cut our emissions by nearly half by the year 2030. And circular economy offers promising opportunities to get us headed in that right direction. And then we also have the economic potential. So according to Accenture, circular economy is a $4.5 trillion opportunity. What we consider waste can be a resource with significant untapped value. And if we can shift our perception of what waste is, we have the opportunity to create new businesses and jobs, strengthen the local economy, and also identify efficiencies that lower our operating costs for businesses. So, creating cost savings through reducing waste that is sent to the landfill, through reduced water consumption and reduced energy consumption. So, what is sustainable procurement and how is it defined? Sustainable procurement is defined as the integration of ESG criteria into an organization's procurement process. But let's further break down ESG into their own separate criteria. So first of all, we have the environmental criteria, which focuses on reducing the environmental footprint of procurement activities, including resource consumption, waste generation, and pollution. Secondly, we have the social criteria, so that ensures fair labor practices, ethical sourcing, and respect for human rights throughout the supply chain. And finally, we've got governance. And think of it as the way a business is run, its rules, practices, decision-making process, particularly around accountability, ethics, transparency, and compliance. So economically, the ESG approach is similarly aligned with circular economy and can lower costs, open new revenue streams, attract conscious customers, and improve access to funding, making it a sustainable and financially smart path for small businesses. So now that we understand what sustainable procurement means, let's dive into the reasons why it is important. Well, first of all, we can consider it as a tool that can help us reduce supply chain disruptions and address these key factors. So environmental protection, economic shocks, compliance, social impact, and green marketing. So let's go over them and look at examples of businesses from within BC and showcase how sustainable procurement can help one address all of these different factors. So what can we do with sustainable procurement? Well, number one, we can start considering the entire life cycle of the product, which starts with acquiring the raw materials to the manufacturing process, transportation of the product, its useful life, and the end-of-life handling and disposal. For example, if we choose products that are made with 50% post-consumer recycled material, half as many virgin resources will be used in the manufacturing process. Then we can advocate for change. Ask our supplier to change how they ship the product, remove unnecessary packaging, shipping in the right-sized box to eliminate the use of airbags, or removing unnecessary tertiary packaging such as a plastic overwrap. We can identify hazardous or polluting materials like bioplastics that end up in our waterways and ensure that none of the items that you're buying release those microplastics. For example, using towels made with natural fibers instead of microfiber towels, which release synthetic microfibers when washing and can pollute waterways, potentially harming human and marine health. Then we can look at reducing our resource usage, so identifying items that can be avoided. For example, you can digitize your operations and reduce the amount of paper you might need. Or if you own a bakery, you can use reusable silicone baking mats instead of buying lots of parchment paper. And then finally, reducing waste generated by identifying your biggest waste streams and finding ways to eliminate them. So if you own a small B&B, use refillable containers instead of small single-use soap bars or shampoos. And sustainable procurement can also be used to mitigate certain types of economic shocks. If you invest in durable products or follow the buy it for life mindset, you're less likely to incur any unforeseen expenses. If you reduce your reliance on volatile markets such as oil and gas, if you are in the market of purchasing new equipment, choose the electric option. You will see a business case for this in the next slide as well. And then sourcing from Canadian or regional suppliers. The geopolitical climate has a huge impact on Canadian business owners. So source from within Canada. This not only helps in today's context, but also creating that constant demand will help local suppliers build their capacity. And you're also reducing the emissions associated with shipping products from other countries. And when you're choosing Canadian products, look for either Product of Canada or Made in Canada logos. The difference between the two is that Product of Canada logos, at least for those products, at least 98% of production costs must be Canadian. All or nearly all ingredients or materials must come from Canada. So this is used when the product is almost entirely Canadian. For example, 100% Canadian maple syrup. Whereas made in Canada, at least for those products, at least 51% of the production must be Canadian, and a significant transformation must happen in Canada. This can include imported parts, ingredients, but it has to say so. So made in Canada with imported ingredients. For example, frozen pizza that is made in Canada with imported cheese is an example. So prioritize Product of Canada, but Made in Canada is the next best option. And also speaking of, let's talk compliance now. We are undergoing a period of change where new and stricter environmental regulations are coming into place. So it's important to ensure that your suppliers follow those laws and ensure traceability of origin. So especially important if you're trying to procure within Canada and want to earn the Product of Canada certification, which, as we know, has seen a lot of support over the past few months. So as I mentioned on the last slide, I wanted to share this testimonial from a business owner who we have worked with closely and runs an all-electric landscaping company. And from their trucks, cars, leaf blowers, and lawnmowers, everything is fully electric. They've been in business since 2023 and have seen great stability and cost savings because they moved completely away from gas, which is a volatile resource, as we have seen or witnessed, especially over the past 5 years. If you want to make a social impact through your business and don't know where to start, you can use procurement as a tool to have a positive impact. You can do that by ensuring your suppliers have fair labor practices, are fair trade certified, or if they're close to you, maybe even go to their facility, have a facility tour to see the working conditions. Sourcing from underrepresented businesses can help circulate money within communities, build capacity, and enhance economic resilience as well. So, sourcing from Indigenous-owned businesses is also a really contextual way of showing your commitment to reconciliation. And finally, if you are taking all necessary steps to procure sustainably, you can and should market yourself as a green business as well. So when you know that your suppliers are truthful, compliant, and there's a high level of traceability, you can make transparent claims without having to worry about greenwashing or misleading environmental claims, which was introduced in Canada's Bill C-59, and then also raise awareness, educate people about your practices, and build a loyal customer base that want to choose the sustainable option. Okay, so we talked a lot about sustainable procurement, but now let's see how incorporating those principles can also help us build resilience in our supply chain. And so by definition, a resilient supply chain is one that can adapt, recover, and thrive amid disruptions. And what are some common disruptions that test a supply chain? So we've got labor shortages or strikes, raw material shortages, product problems, regulatory changes, and geopolitical instability. To make a stronger case for sustainable procurement, we made this Venn diagram here, highlighting some important aspects of sustainable procurement and a resilient supply chain. And in the middle, in the green section, we have everything that links the two and also helps overcome the common challenges that we saw in the last slide. So local sourcing helps overcome issues with transit and trade. We've got transparency and traceability, ensures that everything is in compliance with local laws. Diversified and ethical sourcing. When your sourcing is diversified, you know that the supplier treats their employees well and reduces the risk of strikes. Um, Capacity building. When you choose a small scale local producer or supplier, you're giving them business, you're enabling them to grow and build capacity, and in turn making your supply consistent. And then we've got policy-driven decision making. So, stay on top of new policies coming into place and be an early adopter. An example would be the single-use plastic waste prevention regulation that came into effect last year and prohibited single-use service waste made with hard to recycle plastics or styrofoam. Restaurants and cafes that were working with suppliers that provide eco-friendly options did not struggle and had a continuous supply, while others were looking for new suppliers. And then finally, circular economy. We talked about the principle of circular economy and the 5 loopback systems, which, if incorporated, support a resilient and sustainable supply chain as well. Developing policies and guidelines. So, as a business owner, you can create your own sustainable procurement policy, which highlights what to look for in a supplier or when buying a new appliance. In the next couple of slides, we will go over some important considerations when making operational purchases and retail purchases for your business or organization. And here we also have a pyramid of hierarchy of general considerations, working our way from the top to bottom to help make informed and sustainable choices. And some organizations also create a supplier code of conduct that is signed by the supplier to ensure that certain practices are upheld throughout the entire supply chain. And to ensure the credibility of your suppliers, you can ask them to submit an audit of their operations and the sources of origin. If they're a local supplier, ask for a site visit. And finally, you can also use certifications as a tool to check for their credibility. So on this slide, I wanted to go over some important considerations for business owners and procurement managers when purchasing operational equipment or anything that is to be used on a daily basis, such as computers or furniture. When purchasing or procuring office equipment and appliances, preference should be given to appliances that are either energy efficient and, if applicable, Energy Star certified. It is important to look beyond the upfront cost and invest in something that will be efficient, save money and resources in the long run, and will last a long time before being refurbished or recycled. So essentially considering the life cycle of the product. And when purchasing other operational items and furniture, look for items that are repairable, so materials and pieces that can be replaced if breakage or normal wear and tear occurs. Recyclable products made with recycled content or returned to manufacturer for proper disposal at the end of life. Deconstructible, so products that can easily be broken down into separate components. So items that are made with green components. So looking at products that are constructed with recycled plastic, or if it's a wooden product, then ensuring that it uses FSC recycled certified wood or other post-consumer recycled content. And then purchasing secondhand or repurposing a product in situations where environmental preferable products are unavailable or impractical. Use secondary considerations such as buying secondhand options or the environmental practices of suppliers and producers of those specific products. So if you're considering creating a purchasing policy for retail purchases, I wanted to go over certain considerations to look for when selecting your vendors for those specific items. So first of all, we have local vendors. So buying from a local business keeps money within our community, promotes local economy, and also reduces how far your product needs to travel, which in turn reduces pollution and saves money. Buying products from an underrepresented population like women and minorities helps build a more equitable community. When choosing products, consider purchasing products that have a below average impact on the planet, and consider how it will be disposed of at the end of life, where the product is made, and any certifications such as fair trade or organic. And then socially beneficial products. So when choosing products, consider purchasing products from businesses that are connected to a social benefit. For example, if you are considering vendors, consider a vendor that is fair trade certified, so you know that fair prices are being paid to producers in those developing countries that they source their materials from. Minimal packaging. So packaging can often be wasteful and is usually unnecessary. Purchases from businesses who use minimal amount of packaging, or make a request to the business to reduce the amount of packaging they use on your orders. You can also ask if they offer environmentally friendly packaging. Some vendors use air popped popcorn or shredded paper instead of packing peanuts. And then finally, transport of product. So if you're unable to buy locally, see if your vendor is able to ship products via ground instead of air. When compared to air transportation, ground requires much less fuel and conserves a lot of energy as well. And in the Squamish region, procuring sustainably has been made easier than ever. I wanted to highlight a local mobile refillery that offers a wide range of natural, refillable, and non-toxic products to your doorstep. So this practice reduces so much waste since there is no packaging involved and everything can be refilled. So if you are a B&B in the region and want to avoid using single-use soaps, shampoos, etc., you should look into a service of this kind. Additionally, they try to source locally as much as possible, which not only supports local economy, but reduces reduces emissions that are associated with transportation and shipping. Okay, so now let's talk about sustainable packaging and what exactly sustainable packaging means. So it can be defined as packaging practices that aim to reduce environmental impact and ecological footprint. The environmental impact can be measured in terms of carbon emissions that are associated with, extracting resources, creating materials, transportation, and waste that ends up in our landfill and our waterways. And currently, the plastic packaging makes up about half of all plastic waste, with just around a quarter of waste recycled in Canada in 2022. And the remaining plastic is either landfilled, incinerated, or littered. And the reason, one of the main reasons that recycling rate is so low is because plastic packaging can be composed of many different kinds of resin, the most problematic being the flexible plastic packaging, such as chip bags and snack wrappers. Most municipal recycling facilities are not equipped to handle the flexible plastic packaging, or FPP. And even when the FPP recycling is available for residents like it is in Squamish, there is a lack of access for commercial recycling of FPP and other soft plastics. So businesses have to find service providers at a cost to recycle those materials, which means that sometimes it is cheaper and more convenient to put them in the garbage. So this equates to over 3 million tons of plastics being thrown away in the waste annually by Canadians. So let's talk about why the transition to sustainable practices is that important. So whether it be sustainable packaging or sustainable shipping, number one is consumer preference. A Canadian online shopper study found that when shopping online, about 71% of Canadians look for brands that provide more sustainable solutions to help reduce packaging waste and offset the impacts on climate change. Secondly, we've got long-term economic gains from resource conservation, system efficiencies, and just increased brand appeal. And the hope is by the end of this webinar, you'll have some idea of what you can do to optimize your packaging design as well. Staying ahead of the curve, there are various regulations that have already been passed and that are more like the phase 1 of Canada-wide action plan on zero plastic waste that is to come. So one of the items on their agenda for this action plan is for all plastic packaging in Canada to contain at least 50% recycled content by 2030. So you can start researching your options and incorporating them now rather than be rushed and choose something that doesn't make sense for your bottom line when the regulation comes in place. And then finally, for the planet. So here are 4 key considerations when evaluating your packaging options. We will delve into each one of them and hopefully inspire some ideas for everyone's packaging troubles. But number 1, we've got reducing material usage. It is as simple as it sounds, just eliminating any type of packaging that is not required. Second, we've got selecting the right material, so finding the most eco-friendly option that works for your business and for your product. Then reevaluating your current design, take a step back and ask yourself, is this the most efficient use of resources, money, and space, or can it be improved? And finally, we will explore how basic principles of circular economy can be applied to packaging. So on the slide, we'll go over some ways to reduce your material usage in the first place. And one of the ways to do so is by incorporating reusable packaging materials to reduce the amount of waste that is generated and provide cost savings for your business over time. Reusable pallet wraps, for example, is one such example. A single reusable pallet wrap can eliminate over 450 kilograms of single-use plastic over 1,500 uses. And then eliminating secondary or tertiary packaging, such as plastic overwrap, that should be eliminated unless there is a regulation in place which requires it. So this decreases the cost of packaging. It aligns your business with eco-friendly practices and reduces the burden on your customers to recycle the tertiary packaging. And then finally, ensure that no negative space is present in your packaging of your product, as that reduces efficient space use, increases waste, and you might even end up have to purchase cushioning materials, and all of that just leads to increased cost of shipping. Reducing material use is the easiest and most approachable step towards sustainable packaging and reducing operational costs. So once you've done that, also be sure to share your story with your customers and cultivate an eco-friendly brand identity. So when it comes to selecting the right material, there are a few key considerations that I would like to go over on this slide. So number 1 is moving away from flexible plastic packaging or soft plastic packaging, as it is not easy to recycle and has to be downcycled and require the addition of new oil-based material to recycle into new plastic products. Secondly, biodegradable plastics or packaging that is often hailed as an eco-friendly alternative has a few drawbacks, which does not make them the perfect solution for packaging. So number 1, there is limited biodegradability, and they can still continue to persist for centuries. And then we've got recycling challenges. If bioplastics contaminate a batch of PET plastics or number 1 plastics, the entire batch may be rejected and sent to landfills. Some bioplastics have toxic chemical additives used for properties such as waterproofing and flexibility. Composting is a challenge because for bioplastics you need specific conditions to break down those plastics completely, and in Squamish, all biodegradable and compostable plastics are actually diverted and sent to the landfill. And then finally, it's resource intensive. So switching entirely to bioplastics would require a vast amount of farmland to grow the necessary plant-based materials. And then on the left-hand side here, we've created a hierarchy for sustainable packaging solutions. So number one is elimination and reduction, which is the easiest and best strategy, as we've already discussed in the last slide, followed by creating a system where the packaging can be reused or used as a refillable vessel. This type of model is gaining popularity within BC, especially for refilleries where customers can get an incentive for bringing in their own container, or even with Avalon milk, which is a common item in grocery stores. Recycled content is the next best option since it bypasses the carbon emissions that are associated with extracting resources and only creates a fraction of emissions compared to creating something out of virgin plastic. If the only option for you is to use plastics, ensure to use the kind that can be easily recycled. In BC, that would be plastics 1, 2, and 5. And also make sure that it is composed of a single type of plastic. And finally, substitution would be making use of materials other than traditional packaging materials or plastics. So sugarcane baguettes, for example, is a byproduct of sugarcane processing systems and can be used as a base material for packaging. Sugar Sheet is a company that makes copy paper that is made with 100% sugarcane byproduct. So this slide combines and builds on the principles of reducing material usage and then selecting the right material that we just talked about in our last slide. So number one, we've got finding materials or design which allow for more than one use. So for example, refillable makeup palettes or refillable milk bottles. Secondly, we've got selecting sustainable materials selection. So, selecting sustainable materials that are naturally compostable. And if that is not an option, using post-consumer recycled plastic or other materials such as glass or aluminum that can be easily recycled. Selecting lightweight materials for your shipping, because lighter weight materials reduce shipping costs and also the emissions that are associated with them. Customer appeal through storytelling and information that makes them choose your products over others. And then standardizing your packaging, same size packaging or bulk size option instead of small sized options only can reduce the amount of negative space or empty space in the package that you're sending. And here I wanted to present an example of a innovative packaging design that are these cups which can be used for beverages or foods. A Squamish-based organization is working to bring sustainable and innovative packaging solutions to the region, and this is the first item that they're focusing on. So it's a new and sustainable cup for your beverage on the go that eliminates the need for a lid or a straw since they are integrated into the cup. This way you're only ordering one item, which saves time and up to 30% space saving. There is no plastic coating on the inside, making it recyclable or compostable. And there's an option to choose a line that is made from sugarcane processing waste. So that eliminates the need for virgin resources as well. And here I wanted to talk about circular economy principles and their application in packaging. So we've got the first principle of circular economy, that is to design products and systems in a way that eliminates waste and pollution from the outset. So this involves rethinking product design, so creating refillable options, material selection, which could include items that are made with post-consumer recycled materials, and manufacturing processes to optimize resource use and minimize environmental impact. Second, you have closed-loop recycling and focusing on supply chain sustainability. So closed-loop systems are developed so that all of the materials in manufactured goods can be recycled, usually for use in the same type of product. For closed-loop recycling, the manufacturing process is usually designed with recycling in mind. So think of your aluminum cans that are basically infinitely recyclable. And then achieving a circular economy requires collaboration across the entire value chain, so including businesses, governments, and consumers. So finding ways to incentivize reuse or recycling or return of packaging considers both economic, considering both economic and environmental factors. Right, so now that we've discussed sustainable packaging, let's move on to shipping, which is another really important part of a business's daily operation, especially if you are an e-commerce business or provide delivery options. And we begin by asking the same question. What is sustainable shipping? By definition, sustainable shipping refers to shipping practices that aim to decrease greenhouse gas emissions. And in the world of shipping, there are a few different ways of achieving this. One of the first practice that comes to mind is improving the efficiency of vehicles by either switching to more efficient vehicles, using fuels that have lower emissions like biodiesel in place of diesel, or incorporating new clean technology like EVs or hydrogen-powered vehicles. Also, optimizing your route planning in a way that reduces the amount of fuel used, which in turn reduces the cost, is a great way of managing sustainable shipping. And inventory management, so that you're ordering items in a way that reduces the number of shipments you receive each week or month. And then creating efficient storage spaces. So um, and also reusing shipping materials such as pallets and pallet wraps. This also overlaps with the best practices that we discussed for shipping for sustainable packaging. And then finally looking at zero or low emission last mile deliveries, because it turns out that the last leg of the journey has disproportional impact during shipping, but we will be discussing in the next slide. So now the question is, why should we be adopting sustainable shipping practices? And for one, according to a shipping index from 2022, it was found that the big four e-commerce shippers, so FedEx, UPS, USPS, and Amazon, delivered an average of almost 700 parcels every second in the States. And so unsurprisingly, we found a similar pattern here in Canada, where 23% of our total greenhouse gas emissions come from the transportation and logistics sector. And of those CO2 emissions associated with the delivery transportation, 40 to 50% of it is contributed by the last mile deliveries. Last mile deliveries, which are the final leg of the supply chain, where goods are delivered from a local distribution center to the end consumer. And even though this distance is much shorter, but the frequency is really high, and it is affected by factors such as packaging materials, idling time, and traffic congestion, which adds up. And then, according to another survey in 2022, 76% of Canadian adults are likely to trust and be loyal to a company that works to address environmental issues. So these are just some of the reasons as to why a business should be looking into incorporating sustainable shipping practices. So now let's go over a few strategies and principles that can help you reduce the impact of shipping in your business. So first of all is let's talk about considering the origin of raw materials. So shipping starts with materials that you purchase for the production process of your business. So procuring materials from the closest source to you reduces emissions that are associated with the transportation of those materials and therefore your overall shipping impact. Secondly, work with suppliers that align with your values and follow the sustainable packaging and shipping guidelines that we've discussed so far. You could also look at incentivizing green shipping by including an option on your shipping website that for a green checkout, which provides an option for customers to choose zero emission shipping and minimize returns by including lots of details about the products. And also, in case they do have to return, incorporating a sustainable return strategy where customers can use the same packaging for returns. And finally, couriers are the only the only point of contact for customers when they shop online. So choose responsible couriers that positively represent your brand image and also help you reduce your shipping emissions. And that is the end of the webinar today. Next, we wanted to share some resources that might help you learn more about sustainable procurement practices as well as the circular economy. So if you want to continue to learn a bit more about the circular economy, get an overview, look at tangible business solutions, and find resources to further your learning, you can head to our business guide to the circular economy on Project Zero's website. EDX is another great resource, and they offer various courses on incorporating sustainability and SDG goals into your procurement practices. The educational content on this course includes practical alternatives for optimizing carbon emissions using geospatial analysis and data analytics, as well as learning key concepts in supply chain sustainability, including supply chain carbon footprint, sustainable transportation, green vehicle routing, fleet assignment, truck consolidation, circular supply chain, and more. And if you would like to create your own sustainable procurement policy, you could visit the link on this slide to download a sustainable purchasing policy template and use that to create your own company policy. And finally, if you need guidance on the key certifications that can help you identify sustainable suppliers, visit the resources page on bcgreenbusiness.ca and download this free sustainable procurement certification guide. Once again, I would like to thank the District of Squamish and the Province of BC's Rural Economic Diversification and Infrastructure Program for making this webinar series possible.